Okay, so it's exactly 5 right now, and true to our reputation, we'll start exactly on time. And we've already have quite a few participants who've joined in, and I'm sure a lot more will join in as we go along. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the IIMA Healthcare Alumni Special Interest Group webinar series. As you know, the alumni special interest groups at IIMA are platforms that bring together alumni, faculty, and students and leverage the collective intellectual resources engaged in healthcare, public policy, and other areas to bear on some of the most challenging issues of our times. The ASIG platform allows faculty, alumni, and students to collaborate with each other much more intimately and to engage with industry and practitioners in a more multifaceted manner. Now, the ASIG webinar series itself brings the thoughts, views, and expertise of renowned experts to the IIMA community. As you all know, of course, that the past year and a half have presented several extreme shocks to the system, and the pandemic has led to many tragedies. But it has also seen a far larger number of people fighting back. And that has resulted in a very wide variety in terms of responses to the challenge. With this backdrop, in the earlier parts of the series of this Healthcare Alumni Special Interest Group webinar, we have addressed industry-government collaboration, emerging digital healthcare scenario, investors' perspectives on opportunities in healthcare, Ayush, reimagining the future of healthcare, and consumer healthcare. In each of these discussions, we have in one way or the other touched upon how all this has affected the startup ecosystem and how startups, particularly in healthcare, are evolving to tackle the challenge as well as to take advantage of the opportunities that are coming up. But a far deeper exploration of this vital space is required. And today's topic of startup opportunities in healthcare is a step in that direction. To share his expertise on this, I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Deepak Bagla, Managing Director and CEO of Invest India. Invest India is also the execution agency for Startup India and the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative. Professor Vishwanath Pingle will give a little bit more of a detailed introduction to Mr. Bagla, so I'll leave it to him. Welcome, Mr. Bagla. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. We also have with us Professor Vishwanath Pingle, Professor of Economics at IIMA, and also the faculty coordinator of the Healthcare Alumni Special Interest Group. Welcome, Professor Pingle. We look forward to an exciting session. Now I hand over the platform to Professor Pingle to take over the proceedings.
Hi, Anurag. Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to a discussion on startup opportunities in healthcare and healthcare entrepreneurship with Mr. Deepak Bagla, the CEO of Invest India. Deepak has had a phenomenal career over the past 3 decades, spanning places like World Bank, Citibank, and several private equity, firms with responsibilities across Europe, Africa, and Asia. He, as is introduced, is currently the Managing Director and CEO of Invest India, the National Investment Promotion and Facilities Agency promoted by Government of India. Invest India is also an execution agency for Startup India and Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative. Not just this, I think one thing that is very distinguishing is that he's a member of several high-level government committees, including FinTech, innovation, and infrastructure. Mr. Bagla is also on the advisory board of the government's $7 billion fund of funds for MSMEs and investment committee for the government for US dollars 1.5 billion fund of funds for startup. Education-wise, Mr. Bagla has a bachelor's degree with honors in economics from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, and dual masters in international diplomacy and international trade and finance from School of Foreign Service, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. I can only say this, that one can go on and on and on further talking about Deepak, but I will probably, in the interest of time, I'm going to continue with the conversation. Deepak, thanks very much for joining us for today. For researchers like me who work Most of our work is based on healthcare. This is a great opportunity to pick the brains of somebody, who is really in the thick of things as far as healthcare startups is concerned. And therefore, I am genuinely excited about this opportunity to talk to you today. I'll try and cover as much ground as we can in the limited time that we actually have. I know that Invest India is a little more than healthcare, but for today's discussion, I think we will focus a little more on healthcare. Also, the current pandemic gives us that backdrop to talk about healthcare a bit more, I guess. So I think we'll cover a little bit about startups, what makes startups tick in healthcare, emerging opportunities, policy that you think will help us out, policy changes that you anticipate. We'll cover as much ground, and more importantly, I'd also, out of selfish interest, like to focus a little bit on what academics like me can do and how we can help you, coordinate with Invest India in every sense of the word. So that's going to be the main agenda for the discussion. And just to start this off, I know you've had a fantastic journey so far in your career. Could I request you to introduce yourself by walking us through the journey on what made you come to Invest India in the first place? And how did this all happen? How did the Invest India journey begin for you? And where did it start and where is it going? If you could start us off with a brief conversation on that.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you very much. And I must first also thank Sudarshan and all of you for getting us together. And thank you, Anurag, for the initial introduction. By the way, Rishi, when you were reading out that introduction, and I thought that was you were reading my resume, I couldn't recognize it. There were only parts of it which said 3 decades of work experience. So my vintage is well established, but apart from that, I couldn't recognize any other parts to it. But thank you, really. And guys, it is a pleasure to be with you. I mean, you guys are really what we look forward to learn from. And I mean it the most. And we have a number of our current stars, which are your alums, and a number of those already who are with you today are the ones who helped establish Invest India during a point of time when we were starting off. But a quick backup, you already said school and college. I was just wondering, after St. Stephen's College, we always call it the Temple of Learning, so you really need not have said New Delhi. That was very sad for all of us Stephanians that it had to be expressed that where it was. But nevertheless, we'll take it on. I started, as you saw, the World Bank and then Citibank, it was all over the place. How actually it happened to be Invest India was, in all our lives, and we will all go through those moments, when something will happen which will change it and alter it completely. And for me, we were running that fund which we had started. We gathered over $1 billion in it. And one of them is an alum of your institution. 3 of us have gotten together and started that fund. But then 26/11 happened, and that was quite a changing moment for me in my life. And I decided to do something else, which was not just totally run monetarily. So that's how Invest India happened. And at that point of time, we take it now down to 2015. The government was, the Prime Minister was looking to start an institution to handhold investors coming into India, a focused entity. And the interesting thing is that if you look at the top 15 FDI countries of the world, each one has a very well-established investment promotion agency which reports directly to the head of the state. India, even with all its complexities, did not have one. So it's 2015-16 when we started this, Rishi. And it's been for me, it's been the most overwhelming journey of my life. For the first time, there was, you were working towards something which was not just bonus check at the end of the year and not just for you yourself. It was totally different. And I think that I can speak for each and every one who's joined this entity, 300 of us today, each one from the top institutions like yourselves and from Ivy Leagues globally. By the way, we are also the single largest contributor to Ivy Leagues globally now, since the past 3 years. I don't know if you've seen that. And the other interesting element, that in a short period of 5 to 6 years, we are a startup of the government in many ways. Invest India is now rated by the UN as the world's #1 investment promotion agency, and it's the most awarded agency. Should I go a little to explain what Invest India is, or should we just let this be if you want me to do that?
If you could just maybe take a minute or two to just explain what Invest India does.
Okay.
Just for the sake of setting the context for the viewers. Yeah.
Sure. Quickly, 4 verticals. By the way, this is the only institution in the country which is owned by the state governments and the central government together. So they all come in on one platform. I have 4 verticals. The first is investment promotion and facilitation. We are linked to over 118 countries directly with a single point of contact to all state governments, to all governments, to all departments in the government of India. I have a team in each one of them. And we handhold an investor completely, sitting with them on their business model, helping them create a business strategy for India and getting it executed by getting them all approvals, etc. That's investor promotion facilitation. Second is Startup India. From day one, when Startup India was launched in January 2016, Invest India from creation of policy. By the way, even in the first one, the FDI policy, the industrial policy, all the PLI policies, they were all the straw man, and the creation is done by the team. But they don't just create the policy, they also execute it. Similarly, in startup, everything to do with startup, wherever you've seen of that. And that's a phenomenal story, by the way, guys. Startup India is one of the most phenomenal stories on the planet today. In a period of 16 months, you are number 3 in the world in number of unicorns. You're number 2 in the world in number of startups. You're number 1 in the world with new startups adding every day. In 60 months, Vishy. And this is all a lot about all of you. The third is the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative. Very interesting, guys. Please go on and see there's so much impact investment happening on that. We are doing waste to wealth, where we are picking up sentinel sites across the country. You know this big land dump near Delhi, the garbage dump. We are taking that off. 80% of that will be converted into a 6-lane road of 28 kilometers and things like that. So we are picking up all these things across the country, getting the best technology, the most innovative technology, getting proof of concept and getting that going. Very interesting. But the real element of that is, one, taking up all innovation which is happening both within the government and the private sector and doing a fast track of that into commercialization. It's called Agni, Accelerated Growth of New India Innovation. And that's a very, very exciting program which we're doing. The fourth, obviously, is we're doing very interesting sector-wise series, which we are with the department, for example, with the Department of Ayush. There's an entire team now which is working to create the entire Ayush and wellness strategy for India, and then going to execute it and make Ayush a global brand. I mean, it was phenomenal during this lockdown. You know, we had 3 or 4 elements of Ayush itself, where exports went up from 800% to 1400% in a period of 8 months during the lockdown to Europe and the US. You know, ashwagandha and all those, some of those things. And we realized that that is going to be it. And the last is obviously the project management group, which is where the Prime Minister monitors large projects which are there, 800,000 of them today. We are the ones which manage that entire platform of the country. By the way, the National Infrastructure Pipeline and the new monetization pipeline, that's all managed by Invest India. So let me take it back to you now, Vishy. That was longer.
No, great. Thank you. Thanks for setting that context up. But now let me actually come to the healthcare part of it, which is the main agenda for discussion today. So when one talks about healthcare, I'm sure you'll realize that it's a very, very, very broad spectrum that one's talking about. Pharmaceuticals, medical devices, healthcare delivery. I mean, pretty much everywhere you're seeing a lot of innovation and action happening in the form of startups. So that I have a couple of questions for you in this regard. The first question is, where do you think, I mean, given the strengths that India has, traditionally speaking, where do you think are the opportunities that we actually have in terms of emerging startups that you're going to see? And the second thing is, I'm sure Shark Tank makes us realize every day, every idea is not a startup and every startup is not a company. What makes those startups tick and scale up to the next level? So that's a 2-part question for you. So if you could just tell us a little bit about where you think are the new opportunities in the healthcare forum, as far as given the strengths of our country. And second thing is, what makes them tick and scale up in a reasonable period of time?
So let me put it in perspective. Look at the numbers this year. March this year, we got an FDI of $81 billion, which is the highest ever FDI we've got in our history. And we got it from 89 countries. So, you know, you had 89 countries which have the trust and faith in you in your future. But more interesting is 63 sectors is where that came in. And let me tell you, forget that 81 billion. So my team itself today is managing plans of about $160 billion of about 700 corporates. Each one has a dedicated relationship manager. Healthcare is one of the top 5 sectors, including food processing, electronics. Infrastructure obviously takes it away because of the big checks, but as far as number of deals is concerned. And why is that happening? One, obviously the numbers. I mean, look at our human resource. We'll be 1.5 billion by 2025-26, the highest on the planet. And with an average age of 29-30, the youngest on the planet, at least for the next 80-100 years. So there are 2 elements arising from that. One is where healthcare is concerned, you probably will be dominating the planet, both in terms of solutions and in terms of usage of the solutions. And I will come to that point. But the second very interesting element which is coming up, as a consequence to you being 29 today, and then obviously it's going to be an aging society going forward, that caring for the aged or, who are advanced in age care is going to be a big relevant sector going forward. But now let me retract. This sector is one of the most disrupted sectors going forward. You want to be a part of the sector, you have to think completely out of the box. And the pace of disruption at which is being adopted by this sector in this country of ours is unprecedented. Nowhere else in the world have all those new technologies, adoption and adaptation happen or are happening at a rate which is happening in India. I'll give you a small instance. Look at the 1st of April 2020. We went into a lockdown 24th, 25th. We hardly had any PPEs in India. Ventilators bhi nahi. I told the team, guys, what do we do? Within a period of 60 days, Vishy, let me take you to 31st July, we had more PPEs than we required, which we started exporting to other parts of the world, including the US and others. And please, mind you, at that point of time, global supply chains were totally closed. So what our team did is they went around and scouted for all innovators which were already working on these ideas, be it IITs, be it these small guys in Panipat. We quickly coupled them up with larger companies. With an auto company, we realized that is where, or any other forging companies, bicycle companies, where we could get that going. That partnership happened at such a rapid rate that today you're sitting on excess of that. And the interesting thing there is what? It takes me to the point which you were discussing a little about, the strength of my MSMEs and my startups. Nimble, very, very nimble, ability to pivot their business models, and frugal innovation. These 3 are going to be the pillars of success of tomorrow for any enterprise, what it be. And what I found at that point of time, I had guys who were into textiles, making towels, etc., pivoting their business models, suddenly doing PPEs of the best order. And I'm not just talking of masks, I'm talking of body PPEs, and there is a technical element attached to it, which is fairly high. Sorry, Vishi, you were wanting to say something.
I just wanted to request your clarity on a point. MSMEs taking a risk in such a short term, it's a gamble, let's be clear about it. Nobody knew what was happening. But there's a lot of gamble involved, and MSMEs could probably be a bit of a, on the reticent side in terms of taking that particular gamble. So what's the convincing that Invest India had to do in this particular period? If I may push you a little bit in terms of going into the details of that particular process and getting the MSMEs and the large players together onto a same table and make the coordination work. Because to me, that's a mammoth task that you're talking about in a very short period of time. If you could elaborate a little bit more on that, please.
Vishi, what's interesting? My MSMEs, I have believed the new engine of growth of India will be the MSMEs going forward. We didn't have to cajole them. They were ready there to take it on. They said, tell us what we need to do. That's it. So for example, when you're making a mask, there is a layer in between which we were not making enough in India, which we had to import. We were looking across the globe where to get it from. At the same point of time, when you're doing a PPE, there's a piping. So it completely seals it, that piping we had to get from overseas. These guys were there on the dot. They changed their machine instruction, whatever needed to be done. They were much faster than we were. And let me give you some very interesting studies. There's a Dun & Bradstreet study which just happened. And these are all on MSMEs. And to my mind, the silver lining as we move out of this pandemic and this virus is going to be my MSME and the ability of each of these business models, which have now become far more efficient and they've lost the flab. So, it says of 73 MSMEs, 73% SMEs said that they would survive the COVID downturn. In India, 73%, while in Asia, that number was only 60%. But in fact, 61% of my MSMEs said that they would thrive better after the COVID, because today they've been able to turn around and create far more efficient organizational structures within. And 82% of them said that they have digitized their daily operations, reducing their cost by 54%. This is a study by Dun & Bradstreet, and this is also a study by HP. You know, they have been amazing. These guys do not require any push. They are ready to take on any opportunity which is out there. That is the strength and the pace at which they can get the execution going.
Continuing on the COVID theme, I think I would like for you to focus on two specific, arguments that we've been talking about, that you've been talking about and pointing out. You mentioned the word digitization. And I think, that leads to a whole other paradigm that you're talking about. The word disruption and digitization, they go hand in hand. And one of the strengths that India traditionally has been our software industry. And, we see a lot of, activities happening on that side. So could you comment a little bit on the incoming digital revolution in the healthcare with an MSME focus? The reason why I'm asking is that you're right in saying that MSMEs are going to be the pillars of the Indian, economy going forward. And I think somebody who has seen this kind of a shock and survived, they should be able to take anything pretty much going forward. I mean, that's a very simple fact out there. And I think therefore it's not surprising when you said that some of the MSMEs actually do believe that this COVID probably has helped them turn the pivot that they so desperately required. So therefore, the question to you is, could you please comment further on this argument of where you see digitization helping us significantly in the transformation that we're seeing in the healthcare space in India right now? Because my sense is that that's where we are seeing a lot of entrepreneurship going forward as well, in some sense. Yeah, please go ahead.
Vishy, I'm really glad you picked this up. I personally believe the biggest factor in our modern history of India, which is creating this change, and I will talk about it, the unprecedented change which I'm talking of, both in terms of pace and the scale at which it is happening, is because of the Digital India program. Think about if we did not have digitization, what would have happened to India in the past 20 odd months? Just give it a thought. We would have been totally out there. I mean, look at the examples of there was no playbook with this pandemic that you had to work with. And every day it used to take on a new shape and size. And you had to keep evolving your strategies on a daily basis, literally, to try and see how you combat it. And let us also look at it that across the globe, if you look at it, number of countries which are well known for their healthcare services were the ones which really got challenged and could not manage it that well. While countries which were not that well known for the capacity of the health services were the ones which managed it much better in terms of the numbers they had to deal with. So let me take it back to digitization. To my mind, that is the single biggest element which is facing or which is creating your new India, both in terms of scale and the pace. And why do I say that? For the first time in the history of modern India, one, population has been converted to human resource. And why I say that is because digitization is just the vehicle of complete democratization and equal access to opportunity, equal access to contribute to what is happening in a form of singularity where this growth is happening. And for the first time in our history, all the three pillars, socio-economic, political, are facing a disruption in the same direction of singularity, creating a momentum for that change. So both the pace of change and the scale of change are being driven by the sense of digitization which is happening. And what is digitization doing? It is creating those moonshots. And apart from that, it is creating for you a concept where we were always in shortage, the paucity concept in our mindset, that mindset being changed to abundance. Now, abundance might be a little off, but at least we are no longer thinking. I have a very interesting example. Just the other day, one of the big healthcare providers, a big hospital, very well known, came with a proposal and said, you give me one state For every citizen in that state, for 1,250 rupees a year, I will give them complete Medicare, including CTs which need to be done, list of 72 medicines, including antibiotics which will be required, everything, all testing whenever required. This will be the cheapest in the world. The other example which I had was some about 3,800 or 5,200 happening in Africa, which is just as a pilot project.
And you have the Cuban example as well.
And we have the Cuban one, which was also a higher number than this one. Just imagine, and this is a very well-known provider, and this is all happening on digitization. They explained to me that the kind of resources which are being spent, if you have to go to a hospital today from a small city, and by the time you come to the hospital, of the 100 rupees you spend, only 30 goes into the big hospital, by and large, okay? The other 70 go way late. Number two, there is a lot of capacity already created. I put in a camera and there is going to be, for example, the fastest growing segment, even during this period, Vishy, has been e-diagnostic and teleconsultation. This is the fastest growing segment, grow at about 66 and 73% respectively. Look at the numbers on that one. And this is what is going to grow. So there are a number of these small little, for example, nursing homes across the country. You just upgrade them and you can get them better telemedicine, and each one can be taken care of. So you will see the biggest disruption in the healthcare model coming in now. The second interesting part, the other very important focus which the government is now doing, 50,000 crores has been set aside for R&D. So, we are obviously the largest generics and we are the largest XYZ. The thing now is a lot of question that why aren't we spending as much on R&D and creating molecules of our own? By the way, a lot of that has already started. We are seeing, so in the past 60 months, India has opened over 1,000 new R&D centers of global multinationals. We are today the number one destination, R&D destination of global MNCs having their R&D centers outside of their head office. It was always a head office related syndrome. Now what is happening is that 55,000 crores which is coming in, today 90% of my funding for research is going to only 10% of the institutions. You are obviously a part of that. The idea is to see how do we involve all the other institutions and see how we can start giving grants out for R&D. That will again change. And the moment you have the solutions coming from my small towns and cities, by the way, you have to give me time to speak about that, Vishy, whenever you want, on the startups which are coming. That is again the biggest movement which has happened in India. Today, I have a startup in over 600 districts of India. And that is
I think you make a very interesting point here. If you want to complete healthcare, if you want to achieve the goal of complete healthcare coverage in India, I don't know how we can achieve it without going digital in a significant way, actually. I think we need to be able to leverage our limited resources to, as you said, 140, 50, so the 1.45 billion population that we're going to have very shortly. So therefore, I think I really appreciate the point you're making in terms of where the opportunities are going forward in terms of digitization of healthcare. But I'd like to take the discussion on one more issue that you mentioned, in a while back, which is about Ayush. This is an alternative medicine that we're talking about to the well-established incumbent out there. Could you please walk us through about some of the, interesting startup ideas that you're seeing coming from the Ayush side of things? Again, it takes a lot of courage for someone to put their foot forward and say, I want to do something great in this space. So therefore, I'm particularly interested in talking to you about that particular aspect.
Vishy, this is something, it has not been given the due importance and the focus which we did. This is our core strength. I must tell you, Oriental medicine on the West Coast in the US took off in a huge manner in the past 24 months. The Chinese medicine, etc. And they've done a good thing about telling their story. We have not done that well yet. And this is where this government, when it's stressed, created a separate ministry, etc. Ayush and wellness. This is now going to be the biggest segment going forward. And everybody is looking at wellness in some manner. It also comes into healthcare. And wellness is something where people do, Ayush created small kits during this pandemic, which had about those immunity boosters. And even if you have the virus with you, how do you manage it? I sent it to each and every embassy in India and they asked for more. And we are exporting those kids. So the strength of Ayush, which is lying in there, by the way, we are seeing a large surge of visa requests which are coming in now related to wellness. And large part of that also can be medical tourism, but for yoga and for other kind of things which are coming in. And we had some strange laws where only if you're doing a course for 6 months or 9 months from an accredited university, can you get a student visa? While I had 60,000 people wanting to come and learn yoga in India just for 3 months. So we had to try and see how we can turn around those regulations. But yes, Ayush, you will see and hear more and more of it now going forward. The thing about that is creating credibility around it in the modern mind and showing that what was the scientific thought which went into bringing to whatever has been brought to you. Those are the stories which we need to tell. By the way, let me just give you a quick one on this one. Last year, we went to Davos, 2019. We took 2 of these yoga instructors with us. It was snowing outside, and we thought we'll just do a morning and an evening class for the CEOs. We had so much request that we had to do 6 classes a day. And after that, we used to give them their turmeric latte, which is our haldi doodh, and a little khichdi. And that was the hottest thing in Davos in that year.
Oh, this is phenomenal. Good to hear that. But I think you touched upon a very important point, some strange laws and all that stuff. So that's a nice segue for us to talk about some involvement on the part of the government as well. A major influence, I'm sure, is the policies. Where do you think, what is the direction that you actually think that policies need to be moving in terms of making entrepreneurship a viable thing in the healthcare space? Where do you think are some of the things? For example, there's a question, very interesting question from the audience. I'm not necessarily sure I completely agree with Karthik's views here, but the question here is, intellectual properties drive a lot of innovations, and our intellectual property is presumably a little weaker. I've written a lot about Section 3D in the Indian Patent Act at multiple places. So the views of, your views on whether our intellectual property law is actually weaker or is it capable of upping the innovation? I particularly do not necessarily agree that we are a weak intellectual property regime, but nonetheless, I would really appreciate your views on this.
So let me just pick up on the IPR first. Karthik has raised it, and so did you, Rishi. So on the IPR, you would probably explain it to them that 2017 we redid our entire IPR package, and now it is global standard. It's been acknowledged that our new IPR policy and the rules and regulations around it are in fact better than the best globally. The point here is now on execution of the policy. In fact, the team has been going extensively. Now we are training the legal side community which is involved in it. We are training the police which is involved in it on the real execution of the policy. That is where we are working more on now, because that is where we needed to improve ourselves. And I think it is now very well acknowledged across the globe that our IPR ratings have gone up tremendously, and there is a much higher faith which is happening. We've come a long way, and we still have some way to go, which is what we are working on. By the way, the Japanese and Bloomberg do a study virtually every year on which are good places to work on this one. And they've seen our ranks go up on the IPR side tremendously. But coming back to the policy part. Policy, I think, is a big enabler, Rishi. There's no doubt about it. The startup story of India, today it is being looked at globally. Why? Because it is a phenomenal story of partnership of the policymaker, of the innovator, and of the entrepreneur, of the common man together. How they matched in together. And one thing which I have seen in my past 5 years in this job, there is a very high level of stakeholder consultation before a policy is framed. Very, very high. We are going through multiple layers of that. And the success of the PLI policies, for example, the electronics one, the pharmaceutical one, bears testimony to that fact. The second element in our policies is that they are keeping a sense of flexibility around it. For example, in the PLI policies, there could be that there's a threshold of 500 million. The companies and the stakeholders came and said, can we please lower it also to 100 million? It was lowered further. So there's always this flexibility, and that fits in well when you're doing consultation. So consultation and flexibility are now becoming the keys when you're going to create policy. This is a standard thumb rule, which is now being implemented far more. It's not the government versus the stakeholder. It is the government and the stakeholder, and to protect their rights. Sorry, Rishi, go ahead. You were saying something.
I may probe you a little bit further. What are the directions you actually see policy changes happening that will enable greater encouragement to the startups? I mean, where do you see current, let's say, policy bottlenecks are as far as India is concerned, and where do you think some interventions here and there from the government side of it would actually be a game changer? Are there a set of views that you would strongly think, hey, I wish that government wakes up tomorrow and just changes this particular part of it? I mean, those are obviously highly disruptive ones that I'm talking about, but soft changes in the policies too, as well, where you actually feel that if the policy were to go in the particular direction, it would help a lot in terms of just doubling Invest India, in the next 4 or 5 years.
See, Rishi, both disruptional and soft, both are being done. Now, what is policy? As I said, an enabler. What comes up in the stakeholder discussions is they tell us that through the life cycle, what is it which they require? What I've found is, which is a very clear message given down to us at any point of policy, remove government wherever you can. So, for example, a number of state governments have come in now, where if you're an MSME, you require no approval. You can start your business day one without any approval. You can keep getting those approvals over 36 months. Land has been put aside for them at much cheaper rates where you can come and take it up. I am launching a single window system in the next 3 weeks, a soft launch. On the portal, you will come, you will get one application, you fill in that one application, you'll get all approvals required from the government of India and the respective state government where you're putting it in, all digital. On the digitization, you come to my portal itself, you will see the land available for you. I have 5 lakh hectares already on that across state governments. Click on it, and in the next 2 weeks, we'll also bring it to a point where you can pay for it. So that is the first part, which is easing the business for you and your ability to get into it. So removing those, this ease of doing business, when we moved from 140s to 60s, which the World Bank also calls unprecedented, we reduced over 20,000 compliances. That's when we moved so far. Just think of the complexity of India. So that's the first element. Remove the complexity for them to do it. What is the second element? Help them with their financing. That's where they require it. So every state today has a fund. They have a grant. The central government has a fund where we are funding funds. So myself also on the startup side, we funded over 200 funds, which are feeder funds for startups. That's a huge movement which is happening. And today that movement has got on to a point where we are one of the largest recipients of VC funding for startups specifically. To my mind, the real success of this will actually take on when it's not just you and me, but a person in a small town with a little surplus who wants to put it in a startup which is coming up. And it is soon coming to that point. The third is how we are looking at it to open the market for these people, for startups. And I'll give you an example on that one. For government purchasing, for example, every time you had to apply for a government order, it was 5 years of history which you needed to put in. That has been removed for startups. You can come single away. The other was that you need at least 3 people to bid in for the RF3 bids before you can remove for a startup. Even, for example, the smart cities, we are removing that. What are we doing? We are creating the ability for them to access that market, the huge market of India. And when you see these unicorns being created, over 20 of them in a period of just 6 months, the pace at which we are, it's raining unicorns. Why is that happening? It is because India is an unprecedented market opportunity today, 4 trillion worth of market opportunity sitting today, which is increasing fast. And all what you're doing, one is on that platform of digitization, where with a click, you can reach out to 1 billion people on a phone, 1 billion people with a unique identity, 1 billion people attached to a bank account. And now in the next 2 years, 1 billion on the internet, accessing them. Number 2, the big buyer, which is sitting there, which is the government, able to access that purchase market. And now we have special quotas also for MSMEs and startups, which PSUs have to buy from. So a multiple of these things are happening right across. But the good thing is, people are responding to these policy changes fast. And why are they responding to them well in a positive manner? Because it's been done in consultation with them. That is what is changing.
So I wanted to just further add or request your views on a follow-up point. I mean, I think it's for the production to happen, for the startups to flourish, it is important in some sense to build trust among the customers of the product as well about the India Inc. and India startups and the products that come out of the startups as well. I mean, yes, if you're talking about cell phone, we're talking about Samsung. What is it that an Invest India can do to encourage this trust factor on the production, or not just on the production side? You have the production linked incentives and all that stuff, but on the consumer side of things, if there are any views that you'd have in terms of increasing the trust factor in the customer mind, where somebody's talking about made in India cell phone, somebody's talking about made in India medicines. API is a great story actually for us to pick on and maybe talk about it completely, that made in India thing and trust in made in India.
Rishi, this is what is now the crux and the focus of all of us. That strength, that brand of make in India or made in India, unless and until we do not make that one of the strongest brands globally, it won't get anywhere. And that is where there is this repeated, earnest request to everyone to start focusing on quality. So the first is a number of quality standards are now being brought in by the government. One is to stop bad quality products which are coming into the country, but at the same time, to push a large number of our entrepreneurs to step up on quality. It's no longer that you're going to sell it only because you're cheap. That is going to be very, very critical. Where the country itself is concerned, so we picked up a one district, one product initiative. In fact, I request you and your team and all your students to get involved with us. This is the Prime Minister's initiative. We are picking up one product in every district of India. So the person heading this for me is Dr. Preet. He's an alumni of IIMA Ahmedabad and he's a gold medalist from there. He's heading the team. So what they are doing—
I know him very well, yes.
You know Preet well, right? This is a very exciting project. So for example, they found out that curcumin, our curcumin coming from the Northeast, has the highest level of curcumin, what do you call it? The turmeric coming from India has the highest level of curcumin in it. And still we are importing turmeric. The reason is that we were doing the turmeric and making it into a powder, so the curcumin used to get lost. You have to slice it. So they're working with those people and they've already gotten the first export order of 10,000 tons in a period of just 30 days, 3 months. Similarly, one of our coffees is the most sought after coffee in the world. But what was happening when they were drying the coffee, they were putting it on the mitti outside and the flavor used to keep coming in, which was becoming a problem. So small little things like this. And now we have to see how do we create a brand around it. So that's the other discussion which is happening, that how do we create a brand of make in India, that people have that, that complete confidence and saying, yes, this is what we are going to do. And I would really urge, if you can pick it up and your students there, pick up a project, buy one product in every district in India.
Okay.
And let's work on it together. From the designing,
I would definitely love to pick your brains further on this after this conversation on how one could think of partnerships there. But here is something that I've been working on for the last few months now, actually. My co-authors and I, one of my colleagues and I, along with our PhD student, we've been doing some analysis. And I think we show actually using the data that when government spending on healthcare increases, innovation potential across the spectrum, not just healthcare, but across the spectrum actually goes up. And what our data is also showing, that the same thing is also translating into entrepreneurship. So in that context, if I were to ask you, could you just benchmark India's spending on healthcare? Because, spending on healthcare seems to be driving a lot of innovation activity. And I'm sure the standard growth theories in economics will explain away why that is the case, actually. I mean, if you were to benchmark India's spending on healthcare vis-a-vis innovation with what's happening in the more advanced economy, I mean, again, such an oxymoron called advanced economy. But nonetheless, going by the conventional definition of that term, what are your views on that, and where do you actually see that spending, budgetary spending, that's going to come for as far as India is concerned?
I see 21-22 being the watershed years for Indian healthcare. There's going to be a pre-21-22 and post-22 scenario, which is what you're going to see in healthcare where India is concerned. You are the center of the universe where this sector is concerned now. Completely. I mean, what this pandemic has done has shown where the soft corners were, where we were creaking. The spend on this is going to be huge, at least for the next 6 to 7 years. And when I say that, there's going to be a deluge. I'm already seeing large funding finding its way into healthcare, be it startups or be it creating infrastructure in every aspect of it. We are seeing global money coming into it. We are seeing local money coming into it. We are seeing a large number of people diverting their or expanding or moving from their traditional business models to coming up into healthcare now. So you will witness that as the golden period of healthcare is going to be the next 5 to 7 to 10 years, this decade until 2030.
So where do you see this money channeling to? What kind of specific areas of healthcare do you actually see this money getting into? One obviously would be probably figuring out a way to get universal health coverage in the country and make healthcare available to the rural, remotest part of India. But I mean, where else do you actually see healthcare funding channeling into in some sense?
So delivery obviously will be going to be the biggest check item. You see, the real check goes into the delivery to create that infrastructure right away, be it a 5G, be it delivery, but even otherwise. That is where you see a large bulk of it going. The other element of it is enhancing capacity. For example, we've been creating emergency hospital beds right across, all that being happening. That is going to happen. The other thing where I see big money now coming in, and that is going to be a quantum leap, which is already started, is on the R&D side. On creating new molecules, we've already had some strengths on that. We've had some of our companies which are scaling it up. The fact is that you do not really require government incentive to do R&D. Think about it. R&D is critical if you want to maintain your market position for any company, for any business entity. The government can help you by giving you incentives, which they are, and I think they're also looking to see how they can improve on those incentives and enhance those. But at the end of the day, also there was this, the mindset has also changed of our corporate entities. Today, they have a belief that they want to look at it on a global perspective and not just producing stuff which is low quality or low price, sorry, not low quality, but selling it across to India because the market was huge. That global dominance mindset, the ability to play on the global field is now coming into our Indian corporates and startups too, by the way. It's the new generation and the confidence they're bringing, which is also pushing this entire mindset. And it's all about mindset. Either you be a startup or you be a big, large corporate.
So it's an interesting point you make, Deepak, saying that, we're putting in a lot of money in R&D side of things, but, R&D is inherently highly risky. And in some sense, maybe India might have missed the bus as far as the new molecules are concerned. Don't you think so? I mean, at least some of the more popular reports that are coming out, I'll admit that from the Western side of the world, you see that, that innovation pace is slowing down even in the more established companies, right? I mean, so what are your views about the risk reward as far as the new molecules are concerned?
It's very good you bring that. I think this story has just started this year. The new molecules are now coming in totally different fashion. Even the cost of creating a new molecule is now going to get compressed in a very significant manner. Initially you would give out a patent for about 20 years. It would take you 10 years to get to that point, and then another 10 years so that you had a life cycle where you could reap your margins out of it. That is being totally disrupted as a model. You're getting molecules coming out in 48 to 60 months. And the life of that molecule is not going to remain in a monopolistic situation for the next 10 years. You can make that quick buck on it. So business models there are getting disrupted tremendously globally on this side. It's not just with India. And the good thing for us is that, like in the telecom story, we are picking it up in the new model as it goes. So we're being able to adjust or create our business models around the new rapid-paced model, which is coming in place. And I think our industry will be more than ready to be able to take that on, because now they are in the ability to do so. Okay. And our R&D costs are much lower because it's all about the costing which happens on the human side.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm definitely aware of multinationals setting up their R&D parks in India. It's good to know that even the Indian companies are picking up pace in the R&D side, and
Which
there
is
is a lot of
significantly. Sudarshan is with us. He will tell you.
yes.
Each and every person who's been working with us, our Indian local corporates, have been really putting in and increasing their checks into the R&D side. They're thinking global today. You know,
Right.
that is what has changed, is the mindset where we sit today. I
And-
always give you the example. Sorry, this is one thing, and this is important for your students too. This was just a few months ago, and I shared a global platform, a UN1, on startup with a 19-year-old boy from Sitamhari in Bihar. After completing his education in and around his town and city there, he did not go for a government job or did not come to a big city or go overseas for his studies. He started his own startup, which was to help startups in and around his city and the villages to raise money to get them connected to the global world. And today, he's already raised close to 40 crores for them. And they've come up with some of the most interesting solutions on agri-tech, on healthcare, on some of the other products which they are trying to wrap around from their districts and sell across the globe. This is where the new movement has come in. And, you know, I had one of these top 3 PE funds of the world. I can't name it because I don't have his permission. So the founder, who's one of the richest men in the world, was in our office. And this was just before the pandemic started. And they had given us 40 minutes in our office. He said, Mr. Bagla, I'd like to meet 5-6 of your startups. I've heard a lot about them. He was passing by Delhi. He came into my office, Vishy, at 12 o'clock. He was supposed to leave at 1. He stayed on till 4:30 in my conference room with 24 of my startups. Had invested 5 in his personal money in 5 of them there, walked into my room, gave me his visiting card and said, any startup from India coming in and you feel is good, please send them to me directly. Your startups are exceptional. They give me solutions to 2/3 of the world's problems, not just the top 1/3. And these were startups from small towns and cities, not the big ones, which had come to me today.
No, I mean, one of the questions that I had for you was to talk about the rural side of things. And I think you've quite nicely illustrated quite a bit of it. But nonetheless, I want to probe you on one further thing that you talked about. I mean, I think one of the things that you touched upon is a change in the mindset of the Indian entrepreneur who is basically saying, I don't necessarily want to limit myself to the boundaries. I want to think globally. What other changes in the mindset do you think are required, for the startup journey to flourish in India? That's one amazing thing that you talked about, where we are saying boundaries are no longer. I want to think beyond geography. What other boundaries? Yes.
Can I add one thing?
Please,
I want to stop the temptation when Deepak was talking about the innovation in the Indian sector. Who could have imagined that the vaccine will be developed in a year's time, and Pfizer developing a vaccine in a year's time? So the nature of innovation, which will happen in times to come, is going to be very different. Zydus coming with the first DNA vaccine in the world, and now being prescribed to over 12 years. I couldn't have imagined. I've been having discussion with Deepak, Professor Vijay Raghavan, and when we said that innovation should be the hallmark, but I couldn't see those results happening in last 1 year time. Innovation is going to be hallmark, and innovation will make fundamental difference going forward in the healthcare industry. And as he rightly said, this is the Y2K moment for the Indian industry, and we will see a lot of changes. Sorry, Deepak, for interruption.
No, please, thank you very much.
I couldn't stop my temptation because one is seeing a lot is happening, a lot is changing.
No, so Sudarshan, if you remember in our conversation, I wanted you to come in for this particular question, but I thought you said.
yeah, but I couldn't stop the temptation because some of the discussion.
No, I'm very happy you jumped in, and I'm sure
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
You know, Vishy, Sudarshan is doing some phenomenal work on that. Really, I mean, you should get a chance to maybe, if you can one day share the kind of things he's taking, and he's got clear action plans on it with timelines. Very interesting work which is coming out of that. Sorry, did I lose you?
No, not at all. Please.
Oh, yeah.
No, not at all. So we were talking about the change in the mindset. You talked about 2 particular aspects of mindset. One is start thinking global, not necessarily local. The second thing that you also talked about is that we've now started realizing that quality plays a large role in us being acceptable. I think these are the two main points that you mentioned, but are there other changes in the mindset that you're expecting from the Indian entrepreneur, if I may say so? Yeah, the typical Indian entrepreneur, the change in the mindset we're talking.
See, I think the first biggest change, Vishy, and which is a generational change, which has happened very fast now. I remember January 2016, we were going to launch it. And when I was briefing one of the senior most officers in the country, I said, sir, can I say it in Hindi? मैं आपसे ये कहलवाना चाहता हूँ कि how do we celebrate failure? ये बहुत जरूरी है. You know, the biggest mindset which has changed from our days to now. I remember when I was in city, we used to come to IIMA Ahmedabad one day before the placement, day one. We used to take the list of your top 50. We used to make an offer to 50. All 50 used to accept. We used to take 20, 25 and walk away. Today, nothing like that is going to work. Today, the point is everybody is looking for a meaning in their life. And why are they being able to do that? Because the basics are no longer in question. You lose one job, you know you're going to get another. That's the first part. Failure is no longer a negative. The second big part, which is change, and this is not just about the new generation, it also means that how we as a generation, as parents, are okay with it today. And primarily because we believe that there are other alternatives which are better. The second is the confidence which we got out of our IT industry globally, the acknowledgement, where each of these generational people today are well accepted globally and they think global. Today we have global citizens. It's not just a well. Today they work in that big ocean. So they also have that ability. And third, they know they have that ability to access it. So the solutions which are coming out may have a very strong regional or local relevance, but the adaptation which they can take, this is what was being spoken when I spoke about that PE guy in my office, right. They can take into 2/3 of the world's population right away. And that is what is happening. And the last bit is the amazing market opportunity. Have you seen from concept to unicorn status? We've done some of them in less than 3 years. And these are our unicorns are not based on PowerPoint presentations, like many others in other parts of the world. And by the way, also in that part of the world, it has taken them 70 years to reach this. Even if I look at the US, for example, they started their startups in the 60s, the startup movement. Ours are based on cash flows, whatever they be. But there is a cash flow, underlying cash flow, negative or positive. It will be looked at going forward. So it's a complete new mindset which is coming, and the can-do attitude. There is a solution for everything. Whatever it is, there is a solution for it.
Yeah. No, thanks. I mean, thanks for some very interesting, candid views on this. But there's one question from the audience that I'd like to take. I know we are towards the end of the time that is allocated, so therefore I won't take much of your time, but I'd definitely love for this question to be answered. What are some of the ideas? This is a question from Ritik Singhal. What are some of the ideas of health-based startups in social sector? What could be some of the ideas you think of in terms of social sector, not necessarily profit motive? But what are some of these ideas?
Ritik, skilling, very, very critical. Very, very critical. Old age help and assisted care, very big area coming up. And give it another 3 or 4 years, it's going to be one of the fastest growing areas going forward. 2 or 3 of these sectors, the skilling one being the most important, where we can actually start skilling people in our small towns and cities also, not just for ourselves, but to be able to give care to the entire world and to be able to send them. Many countries are now looking at India for that, by the way. If we can give them people skilled in healthcare support. And a lot of work is happening on that. Those are just 2 of the ones to begin with. But apart from that, fund anybody who's doing yoga or Ayush and you'll be making a quick buck very quick soon.
Final question from my side at any rate, how can people be associated with Invest India? How can people like me, for example, be associated with Invest India? How can we take a few projects?
Listen, about it? There is so much happening with us, women and child development, nutrition, district by district, etc. just write to us. Preet will be your single point of contact. Get involved. You want to come in and spend longer amounts of time with us, internships with us, do projects with us, do guidance with us. On each and every project, you'll find that there is some work already happening. And we are so excited to get all partners with us as much. And you will be really special, all of you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So
in the interest of time, I think as we close this session, I'd just like to point out one thing. At least the biggest takeaway for me as a management professor would be that the change in the mindset of the Indian entrepreneur that Deepak is talking about. I think, we've seen several of our initiatives go not as expected because of the mindset. And we know that, we teach the culture change in the place and all that stuff. It's one of the most difficult things to achieve. But to hear from you saying that there is indeed a change in the mindset of the people, there is indeed a sense of optimism, is definitely an amazing thing. And I think what we need in this pandemic, as hopefully we are coming to the closing stages of this, third wave predictions notwithstanding, is that hope. And on that note, I'd like to thank you, Deepak, for your time and for candid answers to many of my probably a bit inane, probably a bit nice, all kinds of flavored questions. Thank you very much for your time this evening on a Saturday.
Truly a pleasure, must tell you, and to all the students, and to Sudarshan for inviting me and making this happen, and to all of you. And please, guys, let's come join hands together. There's so much to be done. Use our platform and make things happen. And Vishy, I can understand why you're the favorite there of everyone.
Oh, thank you. You're being very kind.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bagla, and thank you, Vishy. It was an absolute pleasure listening to both of you. And some of the numbers that Mr. Bagla that you shared were, really mind-boggling. The amount of development that has happened. It was, obviously there is a lot of talk, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and there's a lot of, energy in the startup space, and we hear a lot of, the startups becoming larger, and several of them becoming unicorns. We hope the numbers of unicorns increases, even the decacorns increases over a period of time. But just to get a sense of the numbers is really, really eye-opening. I think a lot of these participants who've joined in here today would really be surprised by the numbers that you've shared, because we've been scanning what's been happening. So we are one of the informative lots, but still I think we are pleasantly surprised by what you've shared. And also, like Vishy also summarized towards the end, so there are very tangible things that we are looking at in terms of the numbers, but there are also very fundamental intangible things which are making these numbers come about, which is the change in mindsets, and those are the things that actually precede the things that we are seeing in terms of the numbers coming out. And I think those are very, very encouraging as well, because those are very good precursors of more things to come about and more development to happen. And it's been an absolute pleasure to hear you talk. And also, Sudarshan, thank you very much for pitching in there and giving in your 2 cents. Of course, we will keep connecting with you and pick your brains a little bit more. But thank you all for being here today and sharing your expertise and your thoughts with us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.